Hello, and welcome to a tranquil journey through time. As the day's concerns drift away, we're going to explore a period of history that is often misunderstood, a time of both incredible violence and profound cultural change, the Viking Age. Imagine yourself drifting peacefully on the calm waters of a fjord, the cool northern air filling your lungs. The sun is setting, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and violet, and the world is growing quiet around you. This is the perfect moment to close your eyes and let the stories of the past wash over you. The term Viking itself conjures images of horned helmets and brutal raids. While these images are a part of the story, they represent only a small fraction of a much richer, more complex history. The Viking Age, spanning from roughly the late 8th to the mid-11th century, was not just about raiding. It was about exploration, trade, settlement, and the incredible ships that made it all possible. Our journey begins not with a battle cry, but with the subtle creak of a longship's timbers. We'll find ourselves in the rugged landscapes of Scandinavia, modern-day Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. This is a land of deep fjords, dense forests, and countless islands. Life here was shaped by the sea and the land, and it was from this environment that the Vikings emerged. We'll learn about their society, which was surprisingly sophisticated, with a complex social structure and a deep respect for law and tradition. We'll explore their religious beliefs, a rich tapestry of gods and goddesses like Odin, Thor, and Freya, whose stories explain the mysteries of their world and provide a moral framework for their lives. As our gentle longship glides forward, we will witness the first sparks of the Viking Age. The year is 793, and the monastery at Lindisfarne on the coast of England is about to be forever changed. This single event, a sudden and violent raid, marks the traditional beginning of the era. We'll examine why these raids began, looking beyond simple greed to the complex economic and social pressures at home that pushed these people out onto the open seas. We will see how these initial raids evolved into vast campaigns of conquest and settlement. From there, we will follow the Vikings' paths across the globe. Our journey will take us west to the misty shores of Ireland and Scotland, where they established powerful kingdoms and bustling trading towns like Dublin. We will then sail further, beyond the known world, to the desolate beauty of Iceland and the verdant fjords of Greenland. Our quiet journey even extends to the shores of North America, where a brief, daring settlement was established, long before Columbus. But the Vikings were not just raiders and explorers. Our narrative will also focus on their role as traders. They established a vast network of trade routes, connecting the Islamic caliphates in the south to the cold northern lands, and linking the heart of Europe to the great rivers of Russia. We'll see how they became known as the Rus, giving their name to the very land of Russia itself. They were masters of commerce, exchanging furs, amber, and slaves for silver, spices, and silks. As the centuries pass, our story will turn to the gradual transformation of the Viking world. We will witness their slow but steady conversion to Christianity, a process that changed their society from the inside out. We'll see their kingdoms become more centralized, mirroring the changes happening across Europe. This process was not always peaceful, but it ultimately led to the end of the Viking Age as a distinct cultural period. The raiders of the early era became the Christian kings and merchants of the High Middle Ages. Finally, we'll reflect on the enduring legacy of the Vikings. Their impact can still be seen in the language we speak, in the place names across the British Isles and beyond, and in the genetic heritage of millions. Their ships, their sagas, and their reputation continue to fascinate us. So, as you settle in, let go of any tension. The history of the Viking Age is a vast and winding river. Close your eyes and allow its gentle current to carry you into a peaceful, restful sleep. As our quiet longship sails through the mists of history, we arrive at the year 793 AD. On a small, windswept island off the coast of Northumbria, a community of monks lives a life of prayer and contemplation. This island is called Lindisfarne, and its monastery is a center of learning and piety. It's a peaceful place, seemingly protected by its remote location. But this tranquility is about to be shattered. On a clear June day, a fleet of sleek, shallow-drafted ships appears on the horizon. These ships are unlike anything the monks have ever seen, graceful, yet formidable. They carry men from the north, and their arrival marks a turning point in European history. The men who emerge from these ships are Vikings. The term Viking comes from the Old Norse word vikinger, which can be interpreted in several ways, but most often refers to a pirate or raider. These men are not here to trade, they are here to plunder. The monastery, with its rich treasures of gold, silver, and precious books, is an easy and tempting target. The raid is swift and brutal. The monks are either killed or carried off as slaves, and the sacred objects are stolen. The event sends a shockwave across Christian Europe. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, a primary source from the time, records the terror. Never before has such a terror appeared in Britain. The ravaging of heathen men miserably destroyed God's church. So, why did the Vikings begin these raids? The reasons are complex and multifaceted. At home in Scandinavia, there were growing social and economic pressures. The population was increasing, and the best agricultural land was already taken. Younger sons, who did not inherit their father's land, had to seek their fortune elsewhere. Trade was also a significant driver. The Franks, under Charlemagne, had expanded their empire, disrupting established trade networks and pushing the Scandinavians to seek new sources of wealth and new markets. The allure of the riches of the south, especially the unprotected wealth of monasteries, was irresistible. Furthermore, the Vikings possessed a remarkable technological advantage: the longship. We will explore this marvel of engineering in a later chapter, but for now, it's important to understand that it was the key to their success. These ships could navigate both the open ocean and shallow rivers, allowing the Vikings to strike deep inland and disappear before a defense could be mounted. They were fast, versatile, and the very symbol of Viking power. The raid on Lindisfarne was not an isolated incident, but the first of many. Over the next few decades, the Vikings began to systematically target coastal settlements throughout England, Ireland, and France. They were not a single unified force, but rather independent bands of warriors, often led by chieftains who were seeking to gain wealth and prestige for themselves and their followers. These early raids were hit-and-run affairs, but as time went on, the Vikings' ambitions grew. They began to establish winter camps in the lands they raided, allowing them to stay for longer periods and launch more extensive campaigns in the spring. As we drift further into this era, the sound of the raid fades into the past, replaced by the gentle hush of the night. The terror of Lindisfarne was a waking nightmare for its time, a shocking intrusion that forced Europe to confront a new and formidable force. But it was just the beginning. The Vikings would soon transition from mere raiders to settlers, conquerors, and traders, forever changing the map of the known world. As you listen, let the initial ferocity of this beginning soften, and let the historical currents carry you gently toward a deeper understanding of these complex people. As the fire crackles softly, casting a warm glow, we turn our attention from the raids to the people themselves. Who were these individuals who ventured so far from their homes? To understand the Viking Age, we must first understand the society and beliefs that shaped these remarkable men and women. We're now in the heart of Scandinavia, a land of stark contrasts, long dark winters and endless summer days. Life here was harsh, and a person's worth was often measured by their courage, skill, and reputation. Viking society was surprisingly structured, a hierarchy with distinct social classes. At the very top were the jarls, or chieftains, who were the wealthy landowners and powerful leaders. They commanded loyalty, hosted great feasts in their halls, and led their followers in both raids and war. Below the jarls were the carls, the free men who owned land, worked their farms, and made up the bulk of Viking society. They were farmers, craftsmen, and warriors, and they had a say in their local assemblies, or things, where disputes were settled and laws were made. These things were democratic in a sense, a place where all free men could voice their opinions and a sense of communal justice prevailed. At the bottom of society were the thralls, or slaves, who were often captured in raids or born into servitude. They had no rights and performed the most menial labor, but it was possible, though rare, for a thrall to gain their freedom. The daily lives of the Vikings revolved around the farm and the sea. They lived in longhouses, large, single-room buildings shared by families, servants, and even livestock. The central hearth provided warmth for cooking and heating. Women held significant influence within this domestic sphere. They managed the household, held the keys to the family's possessions, and could own property. In the sagas, we see strong, independent women who are central to family life and sometimes even in politics. Central to their existence was their complex and vivid religious mythology. They were pagans, worshipping a pantheon of gods and goddesses whose stories explained the universe. The gods lived in Asgard, a realm connected to the human world, Midgard, by the Rainbow Bridge, Bifrost. The chief god was Odin, the one-eyed Allfather, a god of wisdom, magic, and war. His son, Thor, was the mighty wielder of the hammer, Mjolnir, a protector of mankind and a god of thunder. There was also the goddess Freya, associated with love, fertility, and battle. This rich mythology provided a framework for their lives, explaining natural phenomena and offering hope for an afterlife. A warrior who died in battle might be chosen to go to Valhalla, Odin's great hall, where they would feast and train for Ragnarok, the final battle at the end of the world. This religious worldview also shaped their art and craftsmanship. Their intricate carvings on wood and metal, found on ships and jewelry, depict the intertwined creatures and mythical scenes from their stories. They were master artisans, and their craftsmanship was a source of great pride. They also had a deep love for poetry and storytelling, and their oral sagas, passed down through generations, are a vital source of what we know about their history. These tales tell of great heroes and epic journeys, reflecting their cultural values of honor, courage, and fate. As the warmth of the fire lulls you, let the images of their society and beliefs fill your mind. We see a people who were not just raiders but also farmers, poets, and artisans. Their world was one of both the mundane and the magical, of a structured society and a rich mythology that gave meaning to their lives. As you drift deeper into sleep, let these dualities of the Viking world become a peaceful part of your dreams. The gentle sound of a longship cutting through the waves is the true anthem of the Viking Age. As we leave the warm hearths of Scandinavia behind, we must acknowledge the vessel that made all of their journeys possible. The longship was not just a means of transport. It was a marvel of naval engineering, a work of art, and a symbol of Viking identity. It was their home, their war machine, and their lifeline to the rest of the world. To understand the genius of the longship, we have to look at its construction. It was built using the clinker building method, where wooden planks were overlapped and riveted together. This created a hull that was both strong and flexible, able to twist and bend with the powerful forces of the open sea. The use of a single, massive oak timber for the keel, a spine running along the bottom of the ship, provided incredible stability. The sail, often a single square of wool, was another technological triumph. With it, the Vikings could harness the wind to travel vast distances with surprising speed. But what truly set the longship apart was its dual capability. It had a remarkably shallow draft, meaning it could navigate not only the deepest oceans, but also the narrowest rivers, allowing the Vikings to strike deep into the heart of their enemies' territories. There were different types of Viking ships, each designed for a specific purpose. The Nar was a broader, more robust vessel used for trade and carrying cargo. It was slower than the longship, but could transport goods and settlers over long distances. The most famous, of course, was the longship itself, specifically the Karve and the Drakkar. These ships were long, fast, and light, often built for raiding and warfare. The Drakkar was particularly famous, a fearsome warship often adorned with a carved dragon's head at the bow to ward off evil spirits and terrify their enemies. The longship wasn't just a machine, it was an extension of the Viking spirit. They were buried with their ships in great mounds, a testament to the importance these vessels held in both life and death. The Oseberg ship, discovered in a burial mound in Norway, is a stunning example of their craftsmanship, with intricate carvings and a sleek design that still inspires awe today. Building a ship was a community effort, a testament to their cooperation and skill. The master shipwright was a highly respected member of society, and the knowledge of shipbuilding was passed down through generations. As we drift on these quiet waves, imagine the feeling of being on a longship. The rhythmic creak of the timbers, the sound of the wind filling the sail, the spray of the waves on your face. This was the world of the Vikings, a world defined by their ability to conquer the sea. The longship was the key that unlocked the world for them. allowing them to explore, raid, trade, and settle across continents. It was the tool that made the Viking Age possible, and its legacy continues to shape our understanding of this era. As the longships depart from the shores of Scandinavia, we follow them on a westward course, carried by the prevailing winds and a thirst for new lands. This is the great westward expansion, where the Vikings would transition from temporary raiders to permanent settlers, forever changing the cultural and political landscape of the British Isles. The first major destination is the rugged and fertile lands of Ireland, Scotland, and England. The initial raids on these lands were similar to Lindisfarne, swift and brutal attacks on coastal monasteries and settlements. But as the 9th century progressed, the Vikings' ambitions grew. They no longer simply took what they could and left. They began to establish fortified winter camps. These became bases for more extensive campaigns, allowing them to plunder deeper inland during the summer months. In Ireland, they founded fortified settlements known as longforts at strategic coastal locations. The most famous of these settlements was at Dublin, which grew from a small Viking camp into a major trading hub and a powerful kingdom. The Vikings, or the Gael Gaul as the Irish called them, meaning foreign Gaels, were an integral part of the Irish political landscape for centuries. They were often at war with the native Irish kings, but also formed alliances and intermarried, leading to a new hybrid culture. In Scotland, the Vikings established a strong presence in the north and west, particularly in the Orkney and Shetland Islands and the Hebrides. These became important centers of Viking power, with the Earls of Orkney becoming a powerful force in the region. The Vikings brought their own language, customs, and laws, and their influence can still be seen today in the unique cultural heritage of these islands. The Norse sagas, our primary source for much of this history, are filled with tales of the great Viking families who ruled these lands. England, however, was the site of the most significant Viking settlement. In 865 AD, a massive Viking army, known in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as the Great Heathen Army, landed in East Anglia. This was not a raiding party, but a force of conquest. Led by legendary figures like Halfdan Ragnarsson and Ivar the Boneless, they swept across the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms, conquering Northumbria and Mercia, and establishing a vast area of control in the east of England. This territory became known as the Danelaw, a region where Danish law and custom prevailed. The Great Heathen Army was finally halted by the Anglo-Saxon king, Alfred the Great of Wessex, who after years of struggle was able to secure a peace treaty that formally recognized the Danelaw in 886 AD. The settlement of the Danelaw led to a unique cultural blend. The Vikings brought new words to the English language, such as sky, they, and window. They introduced their own legal and administrative customs, and their legacy is still visible in countless place names ending in by, meaning farm or town, thorp, meaning village, and toft, meaning homestead. As you feel yourself drifting further into a state of rest, reflect on this cultural tapestry. The sound of the wind carries not only the shouts of raiders, but the whispers of new languages and the murmur of communities building a new life. This was the beginning of a profound transformation, one that would shape the destiny of an entire nation. As the sun rises over the winding rivers of Eastern Europe, our journey now takes a different course, a path less known but no less significant. While many Vikings sailed west, others looked east, following the great rivers that flowed from the Baltic Sea deep into the heart of the continent. These rivers, the Dnieper, the Volga, and others, were the highways of a vast trade network that connected the Viking world to the riches of the Byzantine and Islamic empires. The men who traveled this route were not just raiders. They were the architects of a new kind of power and the founders of what would become the state of Russia. The Vikings who ventured east were often known as the Rus. The name itself is likely derived from an Old Norse term for the men who row, a fitting description for those who navigated these powerful river systems. They traveled in their longships, modified to be even more suitable for river travel, often portaging them over land between different river systems. Their primary motivation was trade, not just plunder. They sought out valuable goods from the north, furs, amber, and slaves, which they then exchanged for silver coins, silks, and spices from the south. The Vikings were remarkably adept at adapting to their surroundings. They established trading posts and fortified settlements along these routes, creating a chain of commerce that stretched for thousands of miles. The most important of these routes was the trade route from the Varangians to the Greeks, which connected Scandinavia to the great city of Constantinople, the capital of the Byzantine Empire. The Rus sailed down the Dnieper River, braving dangerous rapids and hostile tribes, to reach the Black Sea and eventually the glittering walls of Constantinople. Here, they were both feared and respected. The Byzantines called them Varangians and often hired them as elite bodyguards, forming the famous Varangian Guard. These Viking warriors were renowned for their loyalty and ferocity, and they served as the personal guard of the Byzantine emperors for centuries. Another major river route was the Volga, which took the Rus to the Caspian Sea and the great markets of the Islamic world. The sheer volume of Arabic silver coins, or dirhams, found in Viking hordes across Scandinavia and the Baltic is a testament to the scale of this trade. These coins were a sign of wealth and prestige, and they fueled the Viking economy. The interactions between the Vikings and the Islamic world were complex. The Vikings were fascinated by the advanced civilization they encountered, and their accounts, like those of the Arab traveler Ibn Fadlan, provide some of our most vivid descriptions of Viking customs, including their funeral rituals. As the years passed, the Rus' influence grew. They were not just merchants, they were also a ruling class. They gradually established control over the Slavic peoples living along the river systems, eventually founding powerful principalities at places like Novgorod and Kiev. The traditional account of the founding of Kiev and Rus, as told in the primary chronicle, describes the local Slavic tribes inviting the Rus chieftain Rurik to rule over them. While the historical details are debated, the result is clear. The Vikings became the founders of a new state. As we let the sound of the flowing river lull us to sleep, we can appreciate this incredible journey. The men of the North, in their longships, were not just raiders but also master traders, bodyguards, and even nation builders, forever linking the worlds of the North, East, and South. As our gentle voyage continues, we leave the familiar trading routes behind and venture into the vast, open expanse of the North Atlantic. This is a journey into the unknown, a testament to the Vikings' incredible bravery and their relentless drive for exploration. We are now following in the wake of legendary figures, men who dared to sail beyond the edge of the known world to discover new lands. This part of the saga is a quiet and lonely one, but its impact on history is immense. Our journey begins with the settlement of Iceland. In the late 9th century, Norwegian Vikings, fleeing the consolidating power of King Harald Fairhair, began to settle this large volcanic island. It was a land of fire and ice, a harsh but beautiful environment. The settlers brought their language, their laws, and their longhouse traditions with them, and in doing so, they created a unique and independent society. They established the Althing, one of the world's first parliaments, a communal gathering where laws were made and disputes were settled. The isolation of Iceland allowed their sagas and traditions to be preserved, giving us a precious window into Viking culture that was largely lost elsewhere. The sagas, written centuries later, tell of the courage and hardship of these early settlers and provide a rich tapestry of their lives. From Iceland, the next step was Greenland. Around the year 985 AD, a Viking named Eric the Red was exiled from Iceland for manslaughter. With his family and followers, he set sail to the west, where he had heard rumors of land. He discovered a vast, ice-covered island, but with fertile coastal fjords. He named it Greenland, a cleverly misleading name, as he hoped to attract more settlers to his new colony. The Greenland settlements, though small, were a remarkable achievement of human resilience. The Vikings lived there for nearly 500 years, farming in the short summer seasons and relying on hunting and fishing to survive the long, harsh winters. They established two main settlements, the Eastern Settlement and the Western Settlement, and maintained contact with their homeland through regular sea voyages. But the most incredible discovery was yet to come. Around the year 1000 AD, Eric the Red's son, Leif Erikson, sailed even further west from Greenland. He and his crew landed on a new continent, which they called Vinland, a land rich with timber, wild grapes, and salmon. Vinland is now believed to be the coast of North America, specifically at a site in modern-day Newfoundland, Canada, called Lonesome Meadows. The archaeological evidence at this site, including the remains of longhouses and Viking artifacts, confirms the saga's accounts. The Vikings, however, did not stay long. They faced resistance from the native peoples they called Skrellings and struggled with the immense distance from their home base. After a few short years of trying to establish a permanent colony, they abandoned Vinland and returned to Greenland. As the cold winds of the Arctic lull you to sleep, reflect on these incredible journeys. They were not driven by plunder, but by a thirst for land, freedom, and a new beginning. The discovery of North America by the Vikings was a historical event of immense importance, a quiet and brief encounter that went unnoticed by the rest of the world for centuries. Their legacy in these far-flung lands is not one of conquest, but of courage and exploration, a testament to the indomitable spirit of a seafaring people. As our journey nears its final chapters, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment in Viking history, the slow but profound transition from paganism to Christianity. This shift was not a sudden event, but a gradual process that unfolded over centuries, driven by a mix of political, economic, and spiritual factors. As you listen to the distant ringing of the church bell, you are hearing the sound of a new era beginning, one that would change the very fabric of Viking society. The first contact between the Vikings and Christianity came through their raids. They saw the wealth of the monasteries and churches, but they also encountered a powerful, organized religion that was spreading across Europe. Early on, their view of Christianity was often pragmatic. They were initially tolerant of the new faith and saw Christian gods as powerful beings, but not necessarily superior to their own pantheon of Norse gods. Some Vikings even received baptism for political reasons, particularly when forming alliances with Christian rulers. The practice of being baptized multiple times, once in a Christian ritual and again in a pagan one, was not uncommon, as it was seen as a way of keeping one's options open. However, as the Vikings began to settle in Christian lands, the influence of the new religion became more significant. In the Danelaw, the Viking settlers lived side by side with Anglo-Saxons, and over time, intermarriage and cultural exchange led to the gradual adoption of Christian beliefs. The rise of powerful Christian kingdoms in England and France also played a role. These kingdoms were organized and centralized, and their rulers often used Christianity as a tool to unify their people and legitimize their rule. For Viking leaders who sought to build their own lasting dynasties, adopting Christianity was a way to integrate into the wider European political system. The conversion of the Scandinavian homelands themselves was a more complex and often violent process. In Norway, kings like Olaf Tryggvason and Olaf Haraldsson, later known as Saint Olaf, used a combination of persuasion and force to convert their people. Olaf Tryggvason, who had spent time in England and had been baptized there, returned to Norway with the goal of Christianizing his kingdom. He broke pagan idols, destroyed pagan temples, and offered his subjects a choice: conversion or death. His efforts, though brutal, laid the foundation for a Christian Norway. Similarly, in Denmark and Sweden, the process was driven by the royal families and was often tied to political power. King Harald Bluetooth of Denmark famously had a rune stone erected at Jelling around 965 AD to commemorate his conversion and the Christianization of his kingdom. The inscription on the stone declares that he made the Danes Christian, a statement that, while perhaps an oversimplification, marks a clear shift in royal policy. The adoption of Christianity brought significant changes to Viking society. It ended the practice of pagan sacrifices and changed their burial customs. It also introduced literacy, as Christian missionaries brought the Latin alphabet and monastic scribes began to record their history. The sagas, which are so crucial to our understanding of the Viking Age, were written down in Christian Iceland. As you listen to the fading sound of the bell, let yourself feel the weight of this transformation. The fierce pagan warriors of the early Viking Age slowly became the Christian kings and merchants of the High Middle Ages. They're a new world shaped by a new faith. As the gentle current of history carries us toward the end of our journey, the once distinctive waves of Viking raids begin to merge with the broader tides of European history. This period, from the late 10th to the mid-11th century, marks the gradual decline of the Viking Age as we know it. The Viking expansion, so powerful and transformative, was not ended by a single event, but by a combination of internal and external forces that slowly eroded the old ways. The sounds we hear now are not just the shouts of battle, but the more complex murmurs of political change and the forging of new nations. One of the most significant factors in the decline was the rise of centralized power in Scandinavia. The independent chieftains and small kingdoms that had sent raiders abroad were gradually consolidated into larger, more stable monarchies. In Norway, kings like Harald Hardrada, and in Denmark, Canute the Great, established powerful realms that mirrored the feudal kingdoms of their neighbors. These kings no longer had an interest in hit-and-run raids. They were focused on building and maintaining a stable state, with a professional army and a centralized tax system. This shift in focus meant that the old way of life, where raiding was a path to wealth and glory, was no longer the primary social engine. The kings also embraced Christianity, which further strengthened their power and brought them into the fold of the wider European political network. The very success of the Viking settlements also contributed to the end of the era. The Vikings who had settled in places like the Danelaw in England and Normandy in France were no longer purely Viking. They had intermarried, adopted local customs, and integrated into the cultures of the lands they had conquered. The Normans, for example, were descendants of Vikings who had settled in France, but by the 11th century, they were thoroughly French in language and culture. This assimilation meant that the distinction between Viking and native began to blur, and the unique cultural identity that had fueled the early raids faded over time. The final chapter of the Viking Age is often marked by two great battles. The first is the Battle of Stamford Bridge in 1066, where King Harald Hardrada of Norway made a final, grand attempt to conquer England. He was met by the English King Harold Godwinson, and in a fierce battle, the Norwegian forces were defeated, and Harald Hardrada was killed. The second pivotal event, which occurred just weeks later, was the Battle of Hastings, where William the Conqueror, the Norman duke and a descendant of a Viking chieftain, defeated Harold Godwinson. William's victory led to the Norman conquest of England, a profound turning point in English history, but it was also a sign that the old Viking warrior culture had been replaced by a new, more formalized and feudal system of warfare. The sounds of swords clanging and men shouting in the background fade into the distance. This is the end of the Viking Age as a distinct period of history. The great raiders had become settlers, the chieftains had become kings, and the pagan world had given way to the Christian one. As we let these final echoes of conflict dissolve into the quiet of the night, we are left to contemplate a world transformed by the energy of these northern seafarers. The Viking story is not just one of brutal raids, but of a people who reshaped the political map of Europe, forged new nations, and laid the groundwork for the modern world. As the final echoes of the Viking Age fade, we are left with a quiet moment of reflection, looking back on the enduring legacy of a people who, for centuries, shaped the course of European history. Their influence, far from being confined to a specific period, continues to resonate in our language, our art, and our collective imagination. The sounds we hear now are no longer of conflict or conquest, but of the lasting impact these northern seafarers left behind. One of the most obvious places to see the Viking legacy is in the English language. As we have seen, the settlement of the Danelaw brought a significant number of Old Norse words into the English lexicon. Words we use every day, such as skirt, window, husband, and even the grammatical pronouns they, them, and their, all have Norse origins. Place names throughout Britain, especially in the north and east, are a testament to their settlement, with names ending in by, Grimsby, Thorpe, Scunthorpe, and Toft, Lowestoft. Their legal and administrative traditions also left a mark, with some of the medieval English shires and legal divisions bearing traces of Viking influence. The Vikings also left a deep impression on the cultural and political landscape of Europe. In France, the Normans, descendants of the Viking settlers, not only conquered England, but also became a powerful force in the Mediterranean, establishing the Kingdom of Sicily. Their ships and martial traditions became part of the Norman military machine. which would play a central role in the Crusades. In Eastern Europe, the legacy of the Rus is even more profound, as they are considered the founders of what would become the great state of Russia. The influence of the Varangian Guard in the Byzantine Empire shows the Vikings' ability to integrate and become a vital part of a different culture. But perhaps the most enduring part of the Viking legacy is in their sagas and mythology. The stories of Odin, Thor, Loki, and the other Norse gods did not disappear with the coming of Christianity. Instead, they were preserved, often by Christian monks in Iceland, and they continue to inspire writers, artists, and filmmakers to this day. The idea of the fearless warrior, the epic sea voyage, and the intricate mythology of a world on the brink of Ragnarok has a timeless appeal. The horned helmets, while historically inaccurate for Viking warriors, have become an iconic part of their modern image, symbolizing a certain kind of wild, untamed power. The real power, however, lay in the longships, the vessels that were the engines of their expansion. As the sun sets on our historical voyage and you feel yourself drifting into a deep, restful sleep, let the gentle finality of this chapter wash over you. The history of the Viking Age is a story of a people who were more than just raiders. They were explorers, traders, settlers, and nation builders. They were a people of remarkable resilience, technological innovation, and a deep, poetic worldview. Their saga is one of immense change and lasting impact, a quiet conquest that echoes through the centuries. Their ships may no longer sail, but their legacy remains, a testament to the power of human exploration and the indelible mark that one culture can leave on the world. Sleep now and let the great longships of history carry you into a peaceful night.